So good morning. I'm Radhe from the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. And I'd like to welcome you all on this second day of the new year to New Perspectives on Integral and Transformational Learning. New Perspectives is a platform dedicated to the integral yoga teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and its application to present-day affairs and issues of our times. Today's webinar is sponsored by our university in Surat, India, and two sister organizations, Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Surat, as well as here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. Through collaborative efforts such as New Perspectives, it's a hope of these three organizations to assist in building a bridge between the East and the West. Today is the first of a series of 4 webinars addressing the development of consciousness. Sri Aurobindo says that all yoga is in essence a heightening, deepening, or widening of our consciousness so that it may become capable of something beyond our ordinary surface state of awareness. The true reality which we seek can be reached, known, and possessed only through a deeper, higher, and wider consciousness. It is only then that the very partial and surface awareness of ourselves may be flooded by a light of self-revelation and turn into self-knowledge. Today we begin this journey on the development of consciousness with Matthijs Cornelissen, who will provide an overview of the approaches to consciousness before discussing more specifically ascension to the higher levels of consciousness. I'd like to welcome you, Matthijs. It's a real honor to have you as a guest speaker today. We look forward to your talk. And at this time, I'd also like to introduce Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko, who is here with me at the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Fountain Inn and is our moderator for today's webinar. And Vladimir will more formally introduce our speaker and open our New Perspectives discussion. Vladimir.
Thank you, Radhe. Of course, it's my privilege to introduce Matthijs Cornelissen, who is an eminent speaker and researcher in the fields of integral yoga psychology, a founder of Mirambika Free Progress School in New Delhi, the founder of Indian Psychology Institute in Pondicherry, author of many fundamental works in consciousness studies in the light of Sri Aurobindo and Indian tradition. He also edited and published famous 2 volumes of the Foundations of Indian Psychology, created the whole generation of scholars and researchers in integral yoga psychology. For several years, on a weekly basis at IPI, I had the privilege to explore with him and a group of ashramites the ancient Indian scriptures, the Upanishads and the Rig Veda specifically, in the light of Sri Aurobindo. And that was the most kind of memorable time of my life. I remember those diving deep into the psychological meanings of the passages and hymns from the Rig Veda and Upanishads. So without further ado, let me invite Matthijs to shed some light onto these profound topics of widening the scope of consciousness in all directions, heightening, deepening, widening, and specifically to concentrate and elaborate on the ascending scales, or as Sri Aurobindo would call it, as heightening of consciousness, going to the higher realms of mind and beyond it. Please, Matthijs.
Thanks, Vladimir, for your friendly words. Your lectures gatherings where your presence was maybe more important than the words at IPI for these many years was indeed a very nice period. I've been asked to talk about widening, deepening, and heightening. And it is good to be clear where we start. Sri Aurobindo has somewhere said that teaching should always be from the near to the far. And generally, when we speak about the near, we think about what is right in front of our nose. But that's actually not the nearest. what is most near to us is our own self. And if we dive a little deeper still and get more to the core, then it's actually the divine. Now, everybody is always hesitant to talk about the divine because you get into all these religious fights. And in a way, of course, that is a topic that's way beyond us. But on the other hand, it is by far the most important because it is literally everything. And it is definitely the thing that is nearest to us because the poor divine cannot hide anywhere. So he is absolutely everywhere. So in that sense, if we want to look for the divine, there should be no need for heightening, widening, deepening, or whatever, because he's there with us, in us, as much as we are willing to open our consciousness to it. The most amazing is that we feel independent, that we feel we are little creatures that have to defend ourselves, that have all kinds of difficulties and dangers and problems to solve and God knows what. That's actually the really most amazing thing. So basically, we have to find ourselves. We have to feel as much as we can at home in where we are. And now that is not always so easy because there's so many things we don't like. And so there are a lot of things standing us between us and the divine, because though we are supposed to surrender to the divine and all that, most of us have lots of stuff that stands in between, our own preferences, our own desires, our own fears, all kind of stuff, ideas. And so the divine is not always as welcome as he should be. But okay. So once we have established that there are things in us that actually stand in the way, then we should try to remove those, at least if we are serious about trying to find our true self and the divine. One of the traditional ways of doing is what Vladimir talks about, is that attempt to rise above it. For some people, that works easily. For me, that is the thing that comes most naturally, you can say. The advantage of it is that you don't need to change your nature too much. And you can just, by concentration, literally raise your consciousness, quite literally, like a rocket almost. You raise it up to a space that is transcendent to absolutely everything. And the amazing thing is that we can do that. We can chuck out everything from our consciousness and go to a space that is literally transcendent of everything. And once one experiences that, one knows that the divine is fine, whatever happens in this world. It has nothing, it will in no way affect it. It is like that thing in the Purna Stotra where it says that if you deduct the infinite from the infinite, it is still the infinite. So it gives a kind of security, but not a kind of, it gives an absolute eternal security. But it does not help to live your ordinary life, because you can remember it afterwards and it changes something in the essence of who you feel you are. But it doesn't change anything in your nature. And you still don't know how to live your life. Because for that, being in that transcendent doesn't help. So there is a bigger problem, and that is how to bring that same eternity, that same vastness, that same integrality, completeness, back in the midst of life. And that is the job of what Mother and Sri Aurobindo have called the psychic being. The self, the presence of the divine right in the middle of our own nature. And for many people, that is actually the approach to the divine that comes most naturally. And to the extent that that presence becomes more concrete, it is very, very wonderful, because you feel that you're really literally with the divine. The divine is there with you. Or at its best, even it is the very essence of your own being. The distinction becomes actually irrelevant. So finding that right inside ourselves is perhaps the most wonderful. It is definitely the most warm and present and alive form of the divine. And then there is, of course, the third one, the cosmic one. It has always been these three forms of the divine that have been stressed. The divine by itself is obviously Anantaguna. It is absolutely every possible quality and absolutely everything. But you could distinguish these three basic forms: the transcendent, completely beyond the manifestation; the cosmos, the complete manifestation as a whole; and then that strange personal presence, the presence of Krishna or the presence of Christ, or it doesn't matter very much how we call it, the presence of the Mother inside ourselves. Interestingly, that cosmic aspect is the one that comes most often without effort. That is a form of finding the divine that people, I think, fairly commonly, to some extent at least, have spontaneously when they sit in front of the sea or watch the stars or some piece of nature, even a flower, something that doesn't threaten you in any manner, so that you can just spread out infinitely into that vastness. That also gives you the certainty that life is okay, that you can be there, that there is no danger, that it is infinite, that you are infinite, that you have always been there. All that comes. But it is only that inner presence that gives you guidance in how to live the life from minute to minute. So after we have done all the exercises of widening and heightening, the real solution of the problem comes, I think, really with the deepening, with the feeling of the divine inside. And the sweetness of that is that you can focus on it, look for it, open yourself up to it in absolutely whatever you do. Because it is basically just an invitation to the divine, to the Mother, to Sri Aurobindo, to whatever you call it. It doesn't really matter that much, I think. To be with you within the midst of life's adventures. The wonderful part is that this can be done because in our essence, we are the stuff of the divine. We are the divine, at least a tiny, tiny portion of it. I would be very happy if there are questions and answers, because I always find it a little bit awkward to give these monologues. So if anybody wants to ask a question, I'll be much more happy with an interaction than with this one-way traffic talk. So if there are questions, you can, I think, write them or just even ask them. There seems to be a question, is that right?
Yeah, there is some from Alok Mohan T. The seeking of the self, it is given in the chat. The seeking of the self or psychic being is through mind or by intellect, to be precise.
The seeking for the psychic being is by the intellect. Okay.
The seeking of the self or self and psychic being, the person speaks as the same thing, but they are of course different, is through the mind or by intellecto. So You can read it for yourself because it is kind of moving. There are more people putting. I will read. Wait a minute. It jumps up.
Because I see another question. I see a question that says it is very challenging to fathom subtle ideas.
Yes, that's in the Q&A box. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can take that one also.
Yeah, maybe you can take that first. And so please put your questions into the questions and answers box, not into the chat, because in the chat it is very difficult to read.
The chat there are already too many also. Mm-hmm. So the first question in questions and answers is, it's very challenging to fathom subtle ideas like supramental. I don't think the idea of the supramental as an idea is not so terribly difficult. The thing is, we are still physical, we identify with our physical nature. And in our physical nature, we have our nervous system, our brain, which makes a map of the world. And most of the time, we simply live in that mechanical mind that is produced by the nervous system. So we think that the world looks the way our mind presents it to us. We live in a constructed reality of our own. So it is not direct knowledge. It is an imitation of reality, which we take very, very serious. And so that's the ordinary mind. The mind is embodied in our brains. The supramental is the knowledge that has built the world. It is the truth that is intrinsic because it is a part of the reality itself. While the ordinary knowledge, the mental knowledge we have, is a constructed one. And one of the fascinating things of modern times is that we have more or less figured out how the mind does that, how the mind works technically, because we can imitate it in computers. But the real truth escapes in the process. So Sri Aurobindo says that the next step in the evolution is to get to learn to think through that supramental knowledge, through the knowledge that directly knows what is true. And not anymore through this poor mind that just has to make some kind of a model of reality and then manage with that. So that in short about the supramental, but of course there's a lot to that. About how to bring the psychic forward in daily life. I think I mentioned something about it, that the wonderful thing of the psychic is that you can try it and try to be open to it from second to second, absolutely in whatever you do. That is, you don't need to take time out for it. You can if you want to, but it's not really needed because the mother is there all the time and you are there all the time. So the only thing to do is to open yourself to listen. There is that beautiful thing before the Gita, where Arjuna has the choice between Krishna's army and Krishna. And he wisely chooses for Krishna. And Krishna, in some ways, represents the psychic element in ourselves. Yeah? Normally, we are busy with that instrumental nature. We think we get happy by doing this or by doing that. That's all the outside. That's the mind, the constructed reality. And Krishna is the presence of the physical presence of the divine, right, in our lives. So that very short episode where Arjuna chooses for Krishna instead of the army, I think is the essence of the whole story. Both of that and of the integral yoga. So if the divine is everywhere and within us, how come the vast majority are undivine? There is, in truth, there's nothing undivine. Because it is just not a possibility. The divine cannot hide, cannot not be anywhere. But we cannot see it. That is possible. And the amazing thing is that because we live in that constructed reality, we have the kind of freedom to think that we are on our own. Yeah, we can kind of choose to be asuric. And what means asuric? It means that you try to, that you choose for the army instead of for Krishna. It's as simple as that. So when you try to live on the outside without the core, because you want to be on your own or something like that, then you fall into that reality that looks fake to you, but in the end is still imbibed by the divine, because the divine is even there. The divine is even the ultimate truth behind the asuric. But the asura doesn't know, so he goofs along like we do. It is quite amazing to what extent in modern times, because we are so terribly proud of our own minds and all, we live in some ways asuric lives because we think we are on our own. And to quite an extent. So it is a matter of having that individuality and then surrendering that to the divine. So it is probably a necessary stage, because we have to kind of individualize, no? We have to kind of become, yeah, I could almost say independent, but you want to become independent of your surrounding. And then you realize that you should be completely dependent on the divine, because then you get a center of individuality that is in complete harmony with everything else. So that kind of pseudo individuality that the asura has is a very strange in-between stage that has its necessity in the history, but has to be overcome, because the plot of the story is to get centers of consciousness that are fully in harmony with the whole. And for that illusion of independence, of being on your own, that has to go. But strange enough, we have to first develop that ego, and we have to, it is a stage. That to go over that hierarchy of minds, that is maybe a bit too detailed. But see, we live normally in that constructed reality of the mind. Now, the first step is obviously that you open that mind, that ordinary thinking in terms of words and sentences, to a higher intuition. Then you can get what is known as the higher mind. Then when you start to see the truths that are on that higher level, that's the illumined mind. And when you really get the idea behind it, then that is the intuition. And then when you completely get out of that individualist mind, you get the overmind. And that is still an aspect of the divine. Someone asked whether the transcendent is the overmind. And that's not true. The transcendent is the transcendent. But if your consciousness doesn't go beyond the overmind, you could think that the transcendent is the divine. And it is the divine, but just one aspect of it. The problem with the overmind is that it is a knowledge of the divine, but of an aspect of it. So the transcendent is, in the end, still an aspect of the divine, because the cosmic is also the divine. And the individual is also the divine. So the transcendent is not the only form the divine can have. So in that sense, the transcendent as such is not over-mental. That doesn't hold. But thinking that the transcendent is the divine, that is a typical over-mental thought. And not good enough.
This is very interesting what you said, that it's a over-mental thinking about transcendence as the divine.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah.
Because then you get that conflict, no? Like for me, I look for emptiness, and another one for the omnipresence of the Atman. And they're both facets of an underlying reality which is both. You cannot even say beyond either, but both at the same time. Yeah.
Brandt is here also.
Sorry?
Courtright Brandt is asking a question here, if you can see.
There is Brandt. That is nice. I would like to see his face. We'll have to do that separately. Rising like a rocket to the overhead plains. I don't know. I was thinking in the afternoon about what to say or so. And for me, that inner energy, which goes by all kinds of names and all, it really feels like a stream of energy that goes up. So the pictures that you see of that are typically those of rockets launched to the moon or Mars or something like that. It is that straight up white energy that just goes and then disappears beyond the manifestation. But I don't know, different people experience it differently. Some people see things very differently. And I think the psychic doesn't need to rise. It is the center of your consciousness, which goes through all these planes and then goes to the transcendent. In the psychic, I don't think you have that feeling of rising. You are just where you are, and you feel a stronger and stronger divine presence. So, and it is also not the mind that rises, because the center of your consciousness gets out of the mind into realms that have nothing to do anymore with the mind. So you can feel that you go, say, from thinking, you go to the heart and you feel, and it is more alive and more true. But this vertical process is something that goes behind in your subtle body. And then indeed you go, say, from here to here, but then you go to other realms. So, and the intention, as you say, the aspiration, yeah, you must to some extent want it, but it happens by itself, because you cannot push yourselves up. I don't think that works. You can ask the divine, the mother, to come down to clean your chakras or to open the path, but then that energy flows on itself. Yeah, there must probably be a will, because you can by your will follow that energy up, or you can by your will stay where you are and increase in your consciousness where you are. I think it should be wonderful if there were enough teachers who could teach this to children in the primary school, because I think this concept that you can center yourself at different places, children can, I think, do that quite easily. So, after all, if you want to go to the heart, you do not think with your mind about the heart, then you'll never get to the psychic, then you stay in your mind. You have to actually go there and then look at the world from there, feel, rather than think.
Most probably this is the answer to the question of Alok Mohanty here, the seeking of the self, what he is speaking. Or psychic being through mind or by intellect, to be precise, but it makes the psychic as an object and the intellect as a subject. And here we have that particular exposition, what you are explaining now, that it will never be
it is exactly
realized.
That issue. If you think about the psychic, that may be quite cute and you can have nice ideas, but you are still thinking. And so it has not. You don't get to the psychic that way whatsoever. You get there by love, by care, by commitment, by opening yourself to the presence of the divine, by feeling Mother's love, by feeling the beauty in nature, by feeling, your love for the divine, for the divine element in others, or for really trying to to do the best for the people with whom you are. There's these kind of things that I think have the most chance of getting you into the psychic. It is not an object of the intellect. I mean, you can talk about it, but that has, I think, very little. This is not bad. It is good to have your concepts clear, but you shouldn't have the illusion that makes it easier to reach it. I think you have people who have that psychic presence or that psychic live in their psychic while they have no clue about the concepts.
Mm-hmm.
I think
actually maybe if I could ask a question, Matthijs, here that you bring to mind on the psychic or even higher realms. Oftentimes there will be suggested exercises that involve imagining, right? Imagining going down a tunnel or imagining a warm light in your innermost being. Is imagining part of the intellect still? Are we still coming from it, from the mind?
Most likely it starts at least like that. Ideally, it should not be, no? You should shift from just dreaming it up and literally sitting there imagining something. Then you're purely in your mind, probably. Mm-hmm. But with a bit of good luck, that can be the trigger of an experience that is not anymore purely of the mind. But it is these guided fantasies and imaginations and projections, they're very tricky. Like if I now talk about the psychic and say that it is a place that you have to go to your heart or so, in a way that's also an imagination, no? I try to make an image that makes it possible to shift from your mind to your heart. But whether you can do it, that depends on your nature. Yeah, I had once a student, and in a class we were doing this thing of where are you in your subtle body. So some people by nature are more here, some are nature more here. So we did something of being here, and this person could even silence her mind without a problem. Then we talked about the psychic and whether she could go down, everybody to go down from here and kind of feel the world instead of thinking about the world. And she said it was for her as if she took a lift down and couldn't get out. And because it didn't work, she went back to here and then could look out again. Yeah. Many years later, I saw her and clearly she had managed to go. She was living much more from here. But I've seen the opposite also. I knew someone who loved biology, really loved it. She loved animals, but she also loved her biology book. And so she always failed for her biology exams because she didn't think about it. Yeah, can you imagine you have a biology book and you love it. You love the pictures. You love the fact that it is about animals that you love and so on. But you are not here, so you cannot study it. So if you get a technical question, you don't know how to answer it. Yeah. So you have people who are really either living from here or from lower or from here and are stuck at that level. But most people unconsciously move up and down. Yeah. So, and you can give a hint on, say, if you think about something, you almost automatically go here. Because thinking, you actually can do only from here. While if you say, think, but it's actually not thinking, feel your grandparents or feel a small child or feel your pet dog or something like that, you'll have to go here because that kind of feeling of love and affection, you can do from here. It doesn't work. And so I think these imaginations also may work, but they may also remain purely mental. And the people themselves will know, I think, because if it becomes real, then unexpected things happen. You don't follow anymore exactly what you're told. Something happens on its own because you enter that world, and then spontaneous things are happening. There was a time I did these kind of things, but I've become more and more hesitant to do it because, yeah, there is a lot to be said to keep life simple. And these imaginations, they tend to remain somewhat on the surface. That also is an area to be explored. So it has probably, there is a period in life where it is useful. But yeah, this that period. Who else has these questions? I don't know if any of these. The problem with these written questions is that I get no idea whether the answer has hit the point or not. Can I simplify the explanations? I'm not able to understand. Now this gets tough. I don't know whether I can do that. If we were together, then it would be easier because we could feel where things go. What am I? The question of Manan Bindal, I'm not getting it fully. The veil of ignorance that keeps us involved in external play of our immediate world is rooted in a particular part of the being. I'm not quite getting the point. It is true. I think that most people are stuck indeed in specific issues. So as children, as a child, if you don't solve an issue fully, but you kind of find a pseudo solution, then that becomes a kind of a groove, which limits your understanding and your freedom later. And that groove has to be somehow released by overcoming the underlying fear or the incapacity or attachment or whatever it was that kept you on that small groove. So you can call that a part of the being. But the solution could be is to feel that presence of the divine more so that the underlying need and the underlying fear becomes less dominating. Madame Goal asks also a good question. You make it sound so easy to reach the divine. Is it really so easy? What simple method do you preach? I hope I don't preach. But the problem with these things is they are impossible or they are easy. I don't think at any stage they're actually difficult. But you have to plow through that period where they appear difficult. There is this beautiful image of the way semi-precious stones, the way to polish them is to put them in a bag together, say all rubies or so. You put them all together in a bag and you make a river or some water flow go through it so that they all rub against each other all the time. Then after a while, all of them start shining. And life is to quite an extent like that. So it is a long process and there is some level of contagion that helps. So being with people who have that contact a little easier helps. Just wanting it is, I think, the most crucial point. I had for a long time an elderly friend. I wouldn't call him a guru, but whenever I pestered him almost every day, asking him to give me a method. How do you do it? I must have asked him 1,000 times. And he told me 1,000 times to be patient. But he basically told that the method absolutely doesn't matter. Different methods get you on a different path. But the point is that you must be clear what you want. And he had a, for me, wonderful example. He lived in Delhi and he said, if you want to go to Pondicherry, to the main Sri Aurobindo ashram, and you by mistake get into the train to Calcutta, and nothing happens. You see Calcutta on the way, no problem. Then you go from Calcutta to Pondicherry, no problem. But if you're not clear about your aim, you will go in the right train to Pondicherry and you will get out in Nagpur. So the point is to really have a high aspiration and accept the long or short or whatever period, that you have to go through that battle. And it is not easy. It is, yeah, as I say, it either is really easy or it is impossible. But that period of strife is needed, because that is the time that you polish and remove all the rubbish in your own nature. And I don't think there's an escape for that. You have to clean that up. So I have also my days that I complain, and but if I start really thinking about it, then I think the whole thing is marvelously well organized. So then I may give the impression that it is easy.
There is an interesting question to this, what you are just saying by Alina. When rising above higher in consciousness, in my experience, I feel there is a part of the mind that refuses to rise. It's almost split into two parts, that goes higher and one part which stays here. It is the physical mind layer.
I think there are two ways. No, there can be something. There is generally in us something that really doesn't want to make progress, and I think the only thing you can do is really acknowledge it. Don't deny it. Don't be too proud or whatever. But accept that there are parts of us that don't want to make progress, that are really attached to their smallness, and then not kind of cut the link. Not by going into a fight with them, but by letting them go, if you can. And otherwise, bear with them as long as they're with you. But there's another part, and from your question, I'm not 100% sure what is what. There can be a part in you that feels that you should combine the two, that you should keep your feet on the ground while you rise to these higher levels. Because the ultimate aim of life is to make that, or to become that bridge between the higher consciousness and the lower world. I think that is the reason why we actually are here. So it may be a bad part that you have to let go because you really need to experience those higher levels, but it might also be a hint that you have actually to stretch. So I'm not 100% sure from the way you write which of the two it is. There are things you have to just let go because they are just obstructing the progress and the light. But in the end, we need to bridge the two layers. Brandt says still that somewhere I thought that Sri Aurobindo said it was best to rise with the psychic, though not necessary. I think the psychic as such does not rise. The psychic is where it is and maybe expands. He also does say that even psychic inspiration ultimately comes from above. But that is by growing. So the psychic is really the presence of the divine in the manifest reality. And I don't think the psychic as such needs to rise, or that's not its job. Unless maybe when you pass away, then the psychic will rise out of this manifest world to come back later. That's not what
this idea of psychic increasing or becoming spiritualized and then opening the gates to the supramental and transcendental is actually a growth rather than ascent. Ascent implies that you leave the lower levels. Psychic is not supposed to do so. It is meant to stay here and increase.
Yeah, that's its job here.
Yeah.
And so maybe you call that an ascent, that you indeed open up to higher and higher levels that you have to do. But the psychic element stays nicely put. That's the center of your being. This whole idea of higher and lower is all is by itself relative, no? There is a great beauty in just being where you are and expanding into both the wideness and the depths and the height without actually moving. But there is a place for all these things, I suppose. Someone asked about emptiness. I don't know. In my experience, there is a place that has that emptiness, and you can go there. And strange enough, from there, it is a very small step to a place where you know your eternity and your oneness with everything. So a kind of fullness and an emptiness go together. But both of these are, to some extent, formless, at least where I know them. They're empty in the sense that they don't have differentiation. And they can feel so absolute that you think that's it. And in some ways, that is it. But it is indeed one aspect. And there comes a time that you can shift from that aspect to another aspect almost effortlessly, because the point of it is that your ego is not there. And your outer nature is not there. So you're kind of free to move if you're not stuck with one tradition. But it points at a reality beyond both, in this, not in the sense of beyond, because there's nothing beyond the emptiness as such, but that is of a higher consciousness than that, because it integrates the whole thing. It is at the same time that emptiness and the fullness, the manifestation and the personal thing, the whole. But that is really beyond our mind. So our mind can only dance around it. That is just not, that's not available for the mind. That's like asking a monkey to play the piano or something like that. That's not going to work. Yeah. The soul and the psychic. See, the psychic is in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, at least, is a technical term. It has a very precise meaning. It is the presence of the divine in the manifest world, in your living body. The soul is an English word that has a very undefined meaning. It can be just yourself. It is the center of your identity. It is sometimes used for the psychic entity, sometimes for the psychic being. Sometimes even for the ego. Sri Aurobindo has a chapter in the Life Divine that is called The Double Soul in Man, and there it is both the surface and the depths. So soul is not a technical term, and Sri Aurobindo uses it very often just as any English person would use it. But he uses it most commonly for the psychic being, I would say. Though I've forgotten that it may also be most common for the psychic entity, but it is somewhere between the two. Yeah. The self is different. Huh? The self is, at least the small self is the ordinary concept of your self-concept, basically, what you think you are. And the capital self is the eternal being that doesn't change, that stays the same from life to life. Your real essence. And yeah, that is that's again something very, very different. But that doesn't change. That is eternal. And that sends the psychic as a kind of ambassador, a kind of representative down into this world to go through an experience or do a little job or do whatever. And they are good friends, so to say, or they are the same thing in essence. But one is the eternal aspect, and one is the embodied, moving and changing aspect.
By the way, this idea of coming back to Brandt with the help, most probably what was meant with the help of the psychic, one can rise easily above, because when
that would be true.
Yeah.
Is that what Brandt says, or what you think he should have said?
I think that is what it was meant to, with the help of the. He didn't say this. He just mentioned that it is rising. But once psychic is in front,
your psychic can help you to rise, and it may be for you at a certain point that what you really need to do is to rise. And it may also not be the need to do, because it may be that you really should try to get the divine down here. They're very different experiences and different stages in your life. But Shubhendu says somewhere that you have to have, at some stage, you have to have that experience of the emptiness and of the transcendent, because it is an essential aspect of the divine. And if you have not had that experience, you are almost certain to take the manifest reality, the constructed reality, too serious. Having a direct experience of the transcendent kind of radically erases that possibility of taking the manifest reality too serious. Because you know then from realization, from experience, that there is something that has really nothing to do with it, and that's perfectly fine. So probably you need that at some stage, just to make sure that you don't get stuck into some lower realization that is kind of comfortable and interesting, but still not really that. So you have to know that emptiness, to know that ultimate purity. And because otherwise, some aspect of the divine will be so enchanting that you think, yeah, that's very important, and that's really what it is. And that is always relative. And that experience of the infinite, I think, helps you to know that relativity experientially. Yeah. But at what stage that comes, or how much it has to come to the front or to the concretely in your life, I don't know. There's so much to be done to change our nature.
And can you please also elaborate a little bit on the difference between psychic entity, psychic presence, and psychic being, that people should understand that it's not
okay,
something...
that is terminologically simple. The psychic entity is really the core of your individual being in the world. Yeah. So it's really the spark, the essence. Yeah. The psychic being is the psychic presence is when you live on the surface, but you start becoming aware that that psychic entity actually exists. So you start feeling your presence in the back or even in the front. Yeah. So you become aware that he is actually there. And you can also feel the psychic presence of someone else. Then you think he's an old soul or something like that. It doesn't need to be your own psychic. You can also feel the psychic of another person. Someone who had that very strongly was Ramananda Maharshi. Both in himself and in others. Well, he didn't have the theory for it, but in experience, he clearly had that. And the psychic being is that part of your nature that comes directly under control of that psychic entity. So that is something that grows over many, many lives, and is basically the outcome of your life. Everything that you really learn and that is important enough to carry with you to another life or whatever, that's all part of your psychic being. That is the part of universal nature that becomes really an aspect of your own incarnate being. And as such, it grows a little bit during each life, and it grows from life to life. That is your psychic being. It is a combination of a piece of nature with a piece of with the self that belongs to it, the real self.
Maybe most probably that answers the question of Anjali Jaipuria, who is asking here, what are the methods one can start with to connect with the psychic and then finally get stationed there?
Yeah, it is. It is an opening, no, and then asking for that presence, and and a lot of grace. I mean, you have to become more and more aware that the divine is really with you, and that it is serious, that it is really a possibility, and that we shouldn't waste too much time just hanging around, kind of, which is an entire waste of time. The mind is there's an anonymous person who, how to accept the role of the mind as a tool. It is by itself neither a tool nor a hindrance. It depends on the stage where you are and what it does. The mind is a very great tool to have, but it is like a good map. If you have a good map, that's very useful. If you have a bad map, that's very harmful. And so for some people, they have ideas in their mind that actually stand in the way. Then it is a problem. And it can be a problem when it is like, for me, it is like knowing Sanskrit. That is a wonderful tool. And for some people, it's a very big problem because it gives them the illusion that they know while they don't. So all these things can help and they can hinder. But the mind is good to clean up and to provide a path. The nice thing about the mind is that the mind is in a way honest, and it can recognize its own errors if you allow it to do that. So if the vital doesn't interfere too much and allows the mind to be true to its own nature, it will correct its errors and become a better and better map. It is still a map. So at some stage you have to, you have to kind of dare to leave it and be out in nature and let keep your map in your backpack. But there are moments that a good map really helps to know where to go, what to do next.
Matthijs, I'm wondering if we could say the same thing about the heart and the emotions, that it can be both a hindrance at times for uncovering the psychic as well as a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are at the level of the heart in the psychic, then it is great. And if you're there at the level of attachment and fear and smallness and hatred and all those kind of things, then it is a very big problem. And then the mind can help to clean all that mess up. The problem is that the unregenerate vital so often uses the mind to support itself. Yeah, so our vital desires force the mind to support their wishes. Then you are in a very cumbersome and difficult position. But yes, nothing better than a pure heart. And also a really clear mind, I think, is a wonderful tool. As long as you know that it is a tool, that it isn't a tool for expression, it is a tool for cleaning up things. Yeah. Someone wants to know what my job is. I teach in the ashram college, and I'm very eager to do something to help that Sri Aurobindo's concepts of psychology and approach to psychology get more entry into mainstream psychology. I find it very pathetic that mainstream psychology is the way it is, and would very much like that to see that change. But my day job is as a teacher in the ashram college, if that was the question. Conscious perceptions. I don't know if you can understand relationships from an electromagnetic or quantum perspective. I think you can understand quantum mechanics from Indian spirituality. I think the opposite would be very, very cumbersome. Quantum mechanics, as far as I know, makes sense mathematically. but it's very difficult to understand. But from an understanding of the Indian concept of consciousness, it is kind of obvious that it should have been like that. So, but I think it is, in terms of real understanding, it is better to start from the Indian side, then the other things fall in place. And I don't see any reason to use a physics understanding to support spirituality. Personally, I don't see the point of that at all. As a society, we have much more faith in physics than in psychology, and to an extent, right, because we're good in physics and bad in psychology. But in the end, spirituality, I think, has a higher authority than the hard sciences. And I think anybody who deals with people will recognize that intuition plays a role, that telepathy exists, that you can really know what another person feels. And all these things are very hard to understand if you work from the side of physics to the depths, and very easy to understand the other way around. Anyone? See, most of our perceptions are just the sense perceptions that the body has. And we are so involved in the body and so attached to what the body does that is the world in which we live. But Sri Aurobindo goes so far to say that you can have, all knowledge can come from inside. All of it. And anything that you can get from outer perception, you can also get from intuition from inside. Now, most of us are not remotely there, but I think you can slowly learn to do more from inside out than from outside in. Yeah. Should you force yourself by discipline or be natural and spontaneous? That's a very difficult question, because that division is a bit artificial, I think. The point is your aspiration, your will to grow. And then it doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like an inner urge to do. The discipline can be pure mind, and then it can be very mechanical, and then it is not a good thing. But if the discipline comes from an inner knowledge that that's really where you need to go, then it doesn't even feel like discipline. Then it feels that that's what you really want. What you can try is to choose always your highest destiny or something like that, your highest level of determination. You're pushed by different things. You're pushed by your mind, by your vital, by your other people, by all kinds of things. So you can try to shift the center of authority in your being to where your soul really wants to go. There are too many questions. I don't think I can keep up. No, the psychic being and the Purushottama is not fully the same. The Purushottama is generally, I think, conceived as something more on the level of the transcendent. But it could be in principle. I think Vladimir will know better. It can be, in principle, the Purushottama could be incarnate also, I suppose. But I think as a term, it is used for the transcendent self, no? For the Paramatman.
Right. I think it is the core of our psychic being. It is that who is presided in the soul. That's what Adhyayajna, what Shri Krishna calls himself. There is a representative. We are all representatives of this highest self, or this being who alone is. Yes, and that's how he is hidden within that spark, as it were. There is a presence of him there. Of course, he is everything. He perceives his being, non-being, transcendental, cosmic. Every way, he is everywhere present in his consciousness. And in that sense, he is not the same as psychic being. But his presence is there, definitely. As everywhere else.
No, it is a very good explanation, and I think also I think you have given a very good many-sided answer to the question. So it is the same in essence, no? But its job is a bit different. something like that. I'm sorry for this very crude summary of what you said. No, the salvation over many life is not a pessimistic approach. The problem is that you have heaven and you have also hell. You don't mention that part of the story. Heaven and hell are a bit difficult to for me to swallow as permanent. No, you have temporary heavens, no doubt, and you have temporary hells. The Vedic theory is very nice in the sense that you get what your karma is, and as we are limited even in our evil deeds, as we are limited in our good deeds, also our punishment is temporary. So you can get over bad luck and over bad negative outcomes. Just following your doctrine is very unlikely to lead to a different state for your soul, because it is too mechanical, it's too much on the surface. The problem is that in all religions, you have had these very dogmatic scholarly types who think that they understand everything, and they make a kind of metal iron rules. And I don't think we should take them too serious. I don't know. This is a very, very complex question. I'm not quite...
You can be punished by good deeds also.
Yeah.
Can be stuck into particular goodness of yourself and be limited again. Limited not to see the holistic presence of the divine everywhere. Be good. There is Indrani
What is
Sandhyal
the purpose? That's a very good question, and maybe a good question to end with. I don't know how long we should go on. What's the purpose of human existence? That's a very, very good question. Yeah, the answer that you have to find for your life, that's a very personal matter, because there is so much to do that almost certainly you can in one life do only one small aspect of it. As a whole, I think the purpose of life is to make the possibility of a many-sided divinity, or a creation that is consciously divine in detail. Yeah, so that you get many centers that have the consciousness of the divine kind of localized in multiple centers. So the purpose of life is really a transformation of our embodied existence by a higher and higher level of consciousness. But that's a very, very vague and general answer. So you'll have to find your job in this life. And that is often something, more limited, because it's part of it is a long labor, no? So you can do something in one life and then do something else in another life, and slowly that builds up a whole picture. I don't know. This is just my take on it. I don't know. There must be different people will have different answers to it.
And we can also, Matthijs, I know there's, almost 20 questions still open and waiting for you, but we are happy also to collect these questions and try to summarize and send them off to you if you happen to have time, or we can also do a second session as a follow-up for these questions. So we'll make sure that one way or the other, the questions get addressed.
Just collect them. And we can see how many actually got answered at some stage or another. And otherwise it might be nicer to have a second session at some stage and see what we can do. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was a delightful session. Of course, there is one more point which we should mention maybe, and we will mention it next time. This is going deep down into the abyss, looking down into our unregenerated being, trying to change the whole subconscious and inconscient being, which is the purpose of us being here. That's why we need heightening, deepening, widening, because we are here to do some work. We are the workers without the wages for delight. Yes,
that's a bit mean. I think we do get them.
We get them. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, no, that's too much grumbling.
Right, but still, this is the grand vision of integral yoga, and it was beautiful to listen to you, Matthijs, and I hope we will connect again and go still on our journey, discovering different methods, ways of practicing integral yoga and changing our lives together. Thank you very much. It was delightful.
Thank you both very much for friendly words and for organizing it. Please do collect all the questions, because there are many interesting details that we did not discuss, actually, if I look at them. So please.
Yes, definitely. We will do that. And
all right.
Okay. All the
very
best.
Happy rest of the new year.
Yes. Happy New Year to all. Yes. Lovely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthijs, so much. Very much appreciated. And just to mention very quickly before people begin to sign off, that this entire month during January, we will be hosting, as Vladimir alluded to, different talks on the development of consciousness. And so we hope you can join us next Saturday, January 9th. We have Dr. Sumitra Basu, who will speak exactly on this descent and ascent from the subconscious and unconscious realms. And Dr. Alok Pandey will then follow the following Saturday, January 16th, on exploring deeper levels of consciousness. And this is, again, will be an entire talk just on uncovering that innermost being, or that psychic, or the soul. And we'll end the last week in January with a discussion on this widening of consciousness, or cosmic consciousness. But obviously, all these movements at the end of the day are to be integrated. We do hope you stay with us throughout this month, because as you will see, each webinar will build upon the previous one. And collectively, we're looking for these 4 webinars in January to really form the foundation for our 2021 New Perspectives webinars, which will be centered on the holistic development of consciousness throughout this year. So I too thank you all for joining. And again, so very much, Matthijs. It was interesting. It was a new format for us. We've never done discussions throughout. We normally say at the end, and this has been very dynamic and energizing and interesting to be able to cover many different aspects of your topic. So I thank you very much.
All right. Thank you too.
All right. See you. Bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.